Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be diving into some fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
A whole set of sources, actually, that lay out what a potential second Trump term might look like.
Oh, wow.
Specifically,
Mm-hmm.
focusing on his first 100 days.
Mm.
That's a long T to
Yeah.
cover
Yeah.
immigration, the economy, national security, even healthcare and energy.
100 days is not that long.
I know it's not.
To get all of that done.
So buckle up.
Yeah, what's really interesting to me is the
Yeah.
breadth and depth of these proposed changes. It's not just like tweaking existing policies. It
Right.
seems to be about like fundamentally shifting direction in a lot of areas.
Okay, let's unpack all this.
Okay.
Starting with immigration.
Okay.
These sources suggest that we could see a return to some of his hardline policies from his first term, but with a twist.
Right, we're talking about a potential revival of the Alien Enemies Act,
Oh, wow.
which has a long and complex history to facilitate mass deportations,
Right.
prioritizing the removal of gang members. That's in there too. But the thing that really caught my eye is this whole idea of using Schedule F to reshape the federal workforce.
Schedule F. I feel like I've heard of that before, but refresh my memory.
It basically allows the president to replace certain federal employees,
Okay.
specifically those in policymaking positions, with political appointees.
Oh, wow.
Think about the impact on agencies like immigration and customs enforcement.
Hmm.
It would be like building a whole new team,
Yeah.
laser focused on carrying out his agenda.
Wow. So it's not just about changing policies.
Right.
It's about changing the people who enforce them.
Exactly.
That's intense. But wouldn't a move like that face massive legal challenges?
Absolutely. The sources acknowledge that a lot of these moves could spark significant legal battles.
Okay.
But it's clear that the potential for opposition isn't really deterring these plans.
That leads us to the economic front. These sources suggest a laser focus on one thing:
What's that?
reducing China's influence.
And they're not pulling any punches. High tariffs on Chinese imports, restrictions on U.S. investments in China, even a 4-year plan to completely phase out Chinese goods.
Phase them out entirely?
It's like an economic decoupling,
Oh, wow.
a complete rewiring of global trade as we know it.
Imagine a world where everything you buy,
Yeah.
from your phone to your clothes,
Everything.
is no longer made in China.
Yeah.
What would that even look like?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, and it's not just about consumer goods either.
right.
The sources also mention eliminating taxes on Social Security for seniors
Oh, wow.
and further tax cuts across the board.
Across the board.
It's a huge economic gamble,
Yeah.
and it's hard to predict how it would all play out.
It's like shaking up a snow globe.
Yeah.
Who knows where all the pieces will land?
Exactly.
Now on the national security front,
Okay.
border security once again takes center stage.
But the approach is arguably more aggressive this time around.
How so?
The sources indicate that Trump might designate Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
What?
This would unlock a whole new arsenal of tools and resources to combat them.
I mean, that makes you wonder how Mexico would react to that.
Right.
It feels like a move that could escalate tensions significantly.
Absolutely.
And then there's the question of funding all of this.
Yeah, where's the money coming from?
That's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
It really is. Especially with all these potential legal battles looming over a lot of these proposals.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
And we haven't even touched on government restructuring,
Oh, yeah.
which is another big theme running through these sources.
Right. There's a clear emphasis on streamlining the federal workforce,
Yeah.
reducing what's seen as bureaucratic resistance. And guess what tool they're proposing?
What's that?
Schedule F.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the impact on agencies like the EPA,
Mhm.
the FDA, the CDC.
Yeah.
It's potentially a seismic shift in the balance of power.
So using Schedule F to essentially handpick the people in charge of implementing policy, removing any potential roadblocks or dissent. It almost feels like a power grab, doesn't it?
It's certainly a bold move,
Yeah.
and one that raises a lot of questions
Absolutely.
about checks and balances, the rule of law,
Right.
and the potential for abuse of power. The sources really suggest a drive to reshape federal agencies to be more aligned with a specific agenda. And that's where the real concern lies.
It's a lot to digest,
It is.
and we've only just begun. These sources suggest even more changes in a potential second Trump term.
Oh, wow.
We're talking healthcare, energy, and a lot more.
Exactly. It's a packed agenda, and we've got a lot more ground to cover. So stay tuned,
Okay.
because this deep dive is about to get even deeper.
I like it.
Yeah. We've covered a lot of ground already, and it's clear that a potential second Trump term could bring about some dramatic changes.
Right.
What really stood out to you?
Honestly, it's hard to pick just one thing. The potential use of the Alien Enemies Act for mass deportations. I mean, that's huge GE.
Yeah.
That would be a dramatic escalation of immigration enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but think about the human impact of such a policy.
It would certainly be a controversial move, and it's interesting how that ties in with that Schedule F thing.
Right.
And this whole idea of like reshaping the federal workforce. It suggests a real focus on controlling the levers of power
Yeah.
and ensuring that those in key positions are aligned with the agenda.
Right. And that brings up all sorts of questions about checks and balances
Exactly.
and the potential for abuse of power.
Mm.
Imagine a scenario
Right.
where
Mhm.
scientific research agencies are suddenly staffed
Right.
with individuals who prioritize economic interests over environmental concerns.
Right.
What impact would that have on climate policy,
Right.
public health, scientific progress?
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
And it highlights the potential ripple effects of all these proposals.
Yeah.
And it's not just immigration either.
Yep.
Think about the impact on national security
Oh,
if
yeah.
Mexican drug cartels are labeled as terrorist organizations.
Right. That could have far-reaching consequences,
Absolutely.
both domestically
Yep.
and in terms of U.S.-Mexico relations.
The sources suggest it could give the administration like new tools to combat these cartels.
Right.
But it also feels like a move that could escalate tensions significantly.
It does. And then there's the whole economic front.
Oh, right.
The proposed policies on China,
Uh-huh.
like that 4-year plan to phase out Chinese goods
Mm.
completely,
Wow.
could have a major impact on global trade and supply chains.
It's like a complete rethinking of globalization as we know it.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where all Chinese goods are phased out. How would your life be different?
It's hard to even imagine
I know, right?
what opportunities and challenges might arise for American businesses and consumers.
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And
Yeah.
it's not just about consumer goods either. There's
Mhm.
this whole thing about eliminating taxes on Social Security for seniors.
Right. And then further tax cuts across the board.
Yeah. It's a huge economic gamble. And it's really hard to predict how it would all play out.
It's like shaking up a snow globe. You just don't know where all the pieces will land.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the potential impact on the environment.
Right. We're already seeing the effects of climate change.
Exactly. And any steps backward could have some really serious consequences for future generations.
It's a stark reminder that the decisions made in the next 4 years
Yeah,
could have lasting implications.
they really could. And that brings us to a crucial question.
What's that?
How likely are these proposals to actually be implemented?
Right.
I mean, some of them seem pretty ambitious,
They do.
to say the least.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the what ifs.
Uh-huh.
But you're right. We need to consider the feasibility of all of this.
Exactly. There are a lot of factors that could influence whether these proposals become reality.
Like what?
Well, political will is crucial. I mean,
Yeah.
even with a strong desire to implement these changes,
Yeah.
there's bound to be pushback from various groups and individuals,
Yeah.
both within the government
Mm-hmm.
and among the general public. We've already discussed the potential for legal challenges.
Right.
And then there's the question of whether Congress would be on board.
Yeah, especially for proposals that require legislative action.
Exactly. The composition of Congress is going to play a huge role in determining what's actually possible.
Absolutely.
Even if one party controls both houses,
Right.
there are likely to be disagreements and debates within the party.
And there's public opinion.
Oh, yeah, public opinion matters too.
How much support do these proposals have among the American people?
Exactly.
I mean, public sentiment can be a powerful force.
It can,
And widespread opposition could make it much more difficult to implement certain policies.
for sure. And plus, we can't forget about the wild card of unexpected events.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, we live in a complex and unpredictable world.
We do.
A global crisis, an economic downturn,
Yeah.
even a major natural disaster could shift priorities and force a reassessment of the agenda.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So even with these sources laying out a potential roadmap,
Mm-hmm.
there's still a lot of uncertainty.
There is. So what are some things we should be watching for
Yeah.
to get a sense of which proposals are gaining traction
Right.
and which ones are facing resistance?
Well, the appointment process is key.
Oh, absolutely.
Who gets chosen for key positions in the administration will tell us a lot about the direction things are headed.
It will.
So keep an eye on cabinet positions, agency heads, and other significant appointments.
Right.
Those selections will signal priorities and provide insight into the overall strategy.
Exactly. So personnel is a big clue.
Yeah.
What else should we be paying attention to?
I'd say keep a close eye on the legislative process.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Which bills are being introduced,
Mm-hmm.
which ones are being debated, and which ones are ultimately making it through Congress.
Right.
That will be a strong indicator of what's actually achievable.
Absolutely. And of course, we can't forget about public opinion.
Right. Polls, surveys, even social media trends can give us a sense of how the American people are reacting to these potential changes.
For sure.
Public sentiment can have a big impact on the political landscape.
It can. It really
A
can.
lot to keep track of.
It is. But that's the nature of democracy. It's a dynamic process
It is.
that requires active participation from all of us.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about
It has.
and a lot to watch for in the months and years ahead.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, there's one more area we haven't touched on that I think is worth exploring.
Okay, what's that?
Healthcare.
Oh, healthcare, of course. It's always a hot-button issue.
It is.
And these sources mention the possibility of another attempt to repeal or modify the Affordable Care Act.
It's certainly possible healthcare was a major focus during the first term,
It was.
and it's likely to be a priority again in a second term.
Yeah.
The sources suggest a focus on alternatives to the ACA,
Okay.
perhaps market-based solutions or state-led initiatives.
But the ACA, also known as Obamacare, has grown in popularity.
It has.
Wouldn't another attempt to repeal or modify it face a lot of opposition?
It definitely would be a challenge. The political landscape has shifted since the last attempt to repeal the ACA, and there's much more public support for it now.
So it's not impossible,
Not at all.
but it would be an uphill battle.
For sure.
And then there's this potential appointment of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.,
Oh, yeah.
which would be a controversial move,
Absolutely.
given his stance on vaccines.
That would certainly be a headline-grabbing move.
It would.
Kennedy's views on vaccines are outside the mainstream scientific consensus.
Right.
So his appointment would likely generate a lot of debate and signal a significant shift in the direction of health policy.
So healthcare is another area where we could see some major changes.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It is.
And it's sure to be a major focus of debate and discussion in the years to come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that the potential changes we've been discussing
Uh-huh.
extend far beyond the first 100 days.
They do.
The implications of a second Trump term could reverberate for years,
Yeah.
even decades to come.
That's a lot to process.
It is.
But I think this deep dive has given us a valuable framework
Yeah.
for understanding the potential landscape of a second term. We've explored the key proposals, analyzed the potential impact, and identified the factors that will shape their implementation.
And perhaps most importantly, we've highlighted the importance of staying informed,
Absolutely.
engaged, and ready to participate in the ongoing conversation about the future of our nation.
Exactly. Speaking of the future,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on how these potential changes might impact the global landscape?
That's a great question. A second Trump term could significantly alter America's role on the world stage.
It could. How do you see it playing out?
Well, the America First agenda seems to be a key driver of this potential shift.
Yeah.
How do you see that philosophy playing out in a second term,
Yeah.
particularly in areas like foreign policy and global engagement?
Well, the America First approach prioritizes American interests above all else, right?
Right.
And that could lead to a more unilateral approach to foreign policy,
Okay.
potentially straining relationships with traditional allies and emboldening adversaries. We might see a reduced emphasis on diplomacy and multilateralism,
Okay.
with a greater focus on military strength and economic leverage.
Interesting. And what about the potential impact on international organizations
Oh, yeah.
like the United Nations and NATO?
There's a possibility of a reduced commitment to these organizations,
Yeah.
both financially and politically. A second term could see the U.S. taking a more transactional approach to international relations,
Okay.
focusing on bilateral agreements
Right.
and pursuing its own interests, even if it means going against the wishes of its allies.
So a potential shift toward isolationism.
Not necessarily complete isolationism,
Okay.
but a more selective and assertive form of global engagement,
Right.
driven by a narrow definition of American interests. It's a move that could have significant implications for global stability and cooperation.
It's a lot to digest.
It is.
And it raises some big questions about the future of America's role in the world.
It certainly does. And I think it highlights the importance of understanding the potential ripple effects of these proposed changes,
Yeah.
not just domestically, but on the global stage as well.
The sources paint a picture of a second term that could be quite different from the first,
It could.
both in terms of policy specifics and overall approach. It's a vision that some will find appealing and others will find alarming.
Exactly. And that's why it's crucial for everyone to engage with this information,
Yeah.
to think critically about the potential consequences,
Right.
and to participate in the ongoing dialogue about the future of our nation.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from immigration and the economy to national security and healthcare, and even touched on the potential global ramifications of a second Trump term.
Absolutely.
It's a complex and multifaceted issue, and it's clear that the stakes are high.
They are. This deep dive has provided a glimpse into a potential future. A future that's both uncertain and full of possibilities.
It is.
It's up to each of us to stay informed, engaged,
Right.
and ready to navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
Well said. This deep dive has given us a lot to ponder, and I encourage all of you to continue exploring these issues
Yeah.
and engaging in thoughtful discussions. It's fascinating to consider how all these pieces might fit together, We've explored potential changes to immigration, the economy, national security, government structure, energy policy, the judiciary, foreign policy, A&D healthcare.
That's a lot, yeah.
That's a lot to process.
It really is. And what makes it even more complex is that these issues are all interconnected. Changes in one area can ripple out
Right.
and impact others in ways we might not even anticipate.
Right, like how a shift in trade policy with China
Yeah,
could impact the economy, national security, and the environmental regulations
exactly.
all at the same time.
All at once. It's like a chain reaction.
Yeah. It's a reminder that we can't view these issues in isolation.
Right.
We need to think about the bigger picture
Right.
and the potential consequences of these interconnected changes.
The whole picture. It's like a giant web.
It is.
You tug on one strand and the whole thing vibrates.
That's a good way to put it. And speaking of the bigger picture,
Yeah.
I think it's worth considering the potential long-term impacts of these proposals. I mean, if even half of these changes are implemented, we could be looking at a very different America in 4 years.
I think that's a key takeaway from all of this. We're not just talking about short-term policy shifts,
Right.
but potentially a fundamental reshaping of American society and its role in the world.
And that raises a lot of questions. What kind of America will emerge from these potential changes? How will these changes impact different groups within society?
Right. What are the long-term consequences?
What will the global implications be?
These are questions that we all need to be grappling with. It's not about predicting the future with certainty,
Right.
but rather about, engaging in thoughtful discussions,
Yeah.
considering different perspectives,
Okay.
and being prepared for a range of possibilities.
This deep dive has certainly given me a lot to think about. If these sources are accurate, a second term could represent a significant departure from the norms and traditions of American governance. It's a prospect that's both intriguing and a little bit daunting.
I agree. And I think it really underscores the importance of civic engagement,
Yeah.
regardless of your political leanings.
Right.
It's crucial to stay informed, participate in the political process,
Absolutely.
and make your voice heard. The decisions made in the coming years will have a profound impact
They will.
on the direction of our nation.
Well said. This has been a truly insightful deep dive,
It has.
and I want to thank you for guiding us through this complex and thought-provoking material.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the future is not predetermined.
Yeah.
It's shaped by the choices we make, both individually and collectively. So stay curious, stay engaged,
Yeah.
and let's continue to explore these important issues together.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has equipped you with the knowledge and insights you need to navigate the complexities of this potential future. Remember, the answers to the questions we've raised